Welcome back to Redacted Frequencies, where we dive into the patterns hiding in plain sight. I'm Cipher.
And I'm Echo. Today we're talking about something that sounds completely unrelated, but, well, you know how we do things here.
Right. So Mountain Dew flavors and global catastrophes. And before you click away thinking we've lost our minds...
Which we might have.
There's actually something here. So, Echo, you've been tracking the Mountain Dew flavor rotation cycle, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's fascinating in the weirdest way. Like, they just killed off Major Melon in January 2025, right?
Mm-hmm.
Along with Spark and Frostbite. And now we're getting all these new ones. Trolli Cherry Lemon just dropped in August. There's this summer sparkler thing at Circle K.
Yeah.
And they're bringing Honeydew from Canada to the U.S., which, okay, cool, whatever. But here's the thing that got me thinking.
Here we go.
The timing. Like, we're in this constant cycle of creating and destroying, you know? New flavors replacing old ones. And meanwhile, we're tracking these global disaster patterns that show the same kind of rhythm.
Right, so you're talking about, what, the 40 to 50,000 deaths annually from disasters?
Exactly, and the $400+ billion disaster events in the U.S. since 1980. It's like there's this predictable unpredictability, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you're saying what? That PepsiCo's marketing department is somehow connected to natural disaster cycles? Because that sounds...
No, not directly, but think about it. We have these massive systems, right? Corporate product cycles, natural disaster patterns, humanitarian crises.
Mm-hmm.
And they all operate on this create, destroy, replace rhythm. Like, just this year, we're dealing with the Gaza humanitarian crisis. Over 1,200 deaths, 200 hostages.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
And at the same time, we're obsessing over whether dragon fruit or infinite swirl is going to be the next big thing in the summer 2025 lineup. It's like we're living in multiple realities at once.
Okay, but I mean, people need distractions, right? Like maybe the reason these flavor cycles work is because they give us something trivial to focus on when the world is literally...
Exactly, when earthquakes and storms and floods are killing thousands of people annually.
Right.
We get excited about, what's that rumored one? Baja Blue Surge with acai lychee blueberries? Like, who even thought of that combination?
Someone getting paid way too much money, probably. But yeah, I see what you're getting at. It's this weird psychological buffer zone.
And the timing is always so precise. Like, they discontinued Major Melon in January, right at the start of the year when everyone's making resolutions and trying to be healthier.
Mm-hmm.
And then, bam, summer hits, and suddenly we're drowning in dragon fruit and infinite swirl and all these tropical flavors when people want to escape.
From reality, from the disaster reports, from the humanitarian crises that just keep happening in the background while we're debating whether strawberry mango or guava is going to be the mid-2026 release.
Yes, and it's not malicious, I don't think. It's this emergent pattern, you know? Like, maybe we need these silly little flavor wars to stay sane.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. You mentioned those NOAA numbers, right? The billion-dollar disasters since 1980?
Yeah, so I was looking at the NOAA data, and, okay, this is where things get really weird. Since 1980, we've had over $450 billion disasters in the U.S. alone. But the pattern isn't random, Cipher. It's accelerating.
How do you mean accelerating?
Okay, so in the 1980s, we averaged like maybe $3 or $4 billion disasters per year. 1990s, it bumped up to around 6. 2000s, we're talking 8 to 10. But now, we're hitting $25 billion disasters annually.
Jesus, that's a massive increase.
Right? And here's the thing. PepsiCo's product release cycles, they started accelerating around the same time. Like in the 80s and 90s, you'd get maybe 1 or 2 new Mountain Dew flavors every few years. But now...
Now it's like
what, every couple months there's something new?
Every couple months? Try every couple weeks. And get this, the rumored flavors for 2025 and 2026, they're getting more intense, more aggressive. Like, we're not just talking fruit flavors anymore.
What do you mean aggressive? Like, what are we talking about here?
Okay, so there's whispers about something called voltage storm, which, come on, that's literally disaster terminology. Then there's crimson chaos and apparently a midnight crisis flavor that's supposed to hit test markets right as we're dealing with, well, actual global crises.
Okay, so, I mean, those could just be coincidental naming choices, but are you saying the timing isn't coincidental?
Look at the pattern, Cipher. Code Red launched in 2001, literally months before 9/11. Baja Blast hit Taco Bell in 2004, same year as the Indian Ocean tsunami that killed over 200,000 people. And now we're getting these crisis-themed flavors right as global tensions are...
At an all-time high. Yeah, I starting to see what you mean, but like, what's the mechanism here? Are we talking about some kind of collective unconscious thing, or...
Maybe. Or maybe it's just pattern recognition gone haywire. Like, our brains are hardwired to look for connections, right? And when you're dealing with the kind of data overload we have now, I mean, we're tracking everything, every disaster, every crisis, every product launch.
Right, and with social media and 24-hour news cycles, we're drowning in information about both the trivial and the catastrophic simultaneously.
Exactly. And speaking of catastrophic, the humanitarian numbers are just staggering. Like in 2024 alone, we're looking at over 300 million people needing humanitarian assistance worldwide. 300 million.
That's almost the entire population of the United States just needing help to survive.
And yet, we're also tracking whether the new Baja Blue Surge is going to taste better than dragon fruit. Like, our brains literally can't process both realities at the same scale, so we compartmentalize.
So the Mountain Dew thing it's not a distraction exactly. It's more like a cognitive pressure valve.
Yes, and it's getting more intense because the pressure is getting more intense. Like, those NOA disaster frequencies, they're not just increasing, they're following almost the same exponential curve as product release cycles across multiple industries.
Wait, multiple industries? You're not just talking about PepsiCo here?
No, think about it. Fast fashion cycles used to be seasonal, now they're weekly. Streaming platforms are dropping new content daily instead of waiting for seasons. Even car manufacturers are doing limited edition models every few months.
So everything is accelerating. Product cycles, disaster frequency, global crises. It's like the whole system is spinning faster and faster.
And maybe that's the real pattern. Not that Mountain Dew flavors cause disasters, but that they're both symptoms of the same thing. A world moving so fast that we need increasingly intense stimuli just to feel anything. Whether it's acai, lychee, blueberry soda, or $25 billion disasters a year.
Jesus, Echo. That's actually terrifying when you put it like that. We're basically addicted to intensity.
Right? And the scariest part? I don't think we can stop. Like, try going back to vanilla Mountain Dew after dragon fruit? Try caring about a single hurricane when there are $25 billion disasters happening? The baseline just keeps moving.
But what happens when the baseline moves so far that we can't... Like, what's the breaking point? Because it feels like we're already there. Or maybe we passed it and didn't notice. I mean, when you need voltage storm and midnight crisis flavors just to get people's attention, when $25 billion disasters a year becomes the new normal?
Okay, so this is where it gets really dark. And I've been obsessing over this data for weeks. The breaking point might actually be mathematical. Like, look at the hurricane data from NOAA. We used to have maybe one Category 5 hurricane every few years, right? But now we're getting multiple Cat 5s annually. And people are already talking about needing a category 6 because the scales can't handle what we're seeing.
Jesus, a Category 6 hurricane. And meanwhile, Mountain Dew is literally running out of crisis terminology. Like, what comes after Voltage Storm and Midnight Crisis? Apocalypse Berry?
Don't even joke about that, because I swear there's probably a marketing meeting right now where someone's pitching Extinction Orange or Doomsday Grape. But here's the thing that really terrifies me. Remember Hurricane Katrina? 1,700 deaths. And it was this massive cultural moment, right? But look at 2024. Hurricane Beryl hit as a Category 5, caused billions in damage, and it was barely in the news cycle for, 3 days? Because we also had wildfires in California, flooding in the Midwest, and that massive tornado outbreak in Oklahoma, all happening simultaneously.
Right. So we're getting disaster fatigue at the same rate we're getting flavor fatigue? Like, remember when Baja Blast was special because it was only at Taco Bell? Now every chain has their own exclusive Mountain Dew variant, and we don't care anymore. And when every month has multiple billion-dollar disasters,
We just accept it as background noise. And that's the real horror, isn't it? Like, I was looking at the UN's humanitarian data, and in 2024, we reached this threshold where over 40% of all people in crisis situations are children. 40%. And the same week that statistic came out, social media was obsessing over whether the limited edition Frostbite revival was going to be as good as the original Frostbite from 2018. We're treating human suffering and artificial flavor chemistry with the same level of attention.
that's actually sickening when you put it like that. So is there any way out? Like, can we just stop? Can we dial back the intensity somehow, or are we locked into this accelerating spiral?
I don't think we can, at least not voluntarily. Because think about it. When's the last time any major corporation voluntarily slowed down their product cycles? When is the last time people got excited about moderation, about less intense flavors, or fewer disasters making headlines? We're psychologically adapted to this acceleration now. Like, remember when Mountain Dew was just Mountain Dew? One flavor, green bottle, same taste for decades?
Yeah, and it was enough. People were satisfied with just Mountain Dew. But now, if they released a flavor called Classic Green, it would probably flop because it's not extreme enough. We need Electric Lime Lightning or Neon Nuclear Citrus just to register as different.
Exactly, and that's what I think is happening to our capacity for empathy, for genuine response to crisis. When the baseline keeps moving, when $25 billion disasters becomes normal, when 300 million people needing aid is just another statistic, we're not becoming callous on purpose. We're becoming callous because our brains literally cannot process that level of intensity indefinitely. So we compartmentalize into these parallel realities where we can debate Mountain Dew flavors with genuine passion because it's the only level of stimulation we can still actually handle without shutting down completely.
So we're not just addicted to intensity. We're using artificial intensity as a psychological buffer against real intensity that we can no longer process. Mountain Dew flavors aren't distracting us from disasters. They're the only way we can still feel something without being completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of what's actually happening. That's actually the most terrifying thing we've talked about on this show. We're living in a world where crimson chaos flavored soda is how we cope with actual crimson chaos.
And that's the thing that really terrifies me. We're becoming numb to everything. Like, when actual apocalyptic events happen, we literally can't process them at the scale they deserve because we've been training our brains to think catastrophe is just, flavor text. literally.
So when real midnight crisis hits, and I mean real breakdown of social systems, real climate collapse, real humanitarian disasters on a scale we haven't seen, our response is going to be what? Launch a new flavor called End Times Tropical Punch?
Probably. And the worst part is, I don't know if we can break out of this cycle. Like, I've been thinking about this for months, and I keep coming back to the same question. What would it even look like to slow down, to actually process what's happening instead of just escalating to the next level of intensity?
I mean, maybe we already tried? Like, remember the whole mindfulness trend? Meditation apps, slow living movements? But what happened? They turned into billion-dollar industries with gamified streak counters and premium subscription tiers. We commercialized slowing down.
Exactly. And meanwhile, look at the actual numbers. Those 300 million people needing humanitarian assistance, that number has doubled in just the last 5 years. Doubled! But we're still debating whether Baja Honeydew or Trolli Cherry Lemon represents better consumer innovation.
You know what's really messing with me? The fact that we're having this conversation at all. Like 5 years ago, nobody would have connected Mountain Dew flavors to global catastrophe patterns. But now it feels obvious. Like we're all starting to see the same patterns because they're getting too big to ignore.
Maybe that's actually the hope, though. Like, when the patterns become visible, when we can't ignore the absurdity anymore, maybe that's when something shifts. Maybe that's when they start asking different questions instead of just riding the acceleration until it kills us all.
Different questions like, what if we actually stopped and grieved the 1,000 people who died in Gaza instead of immediately jumping to the next crisis? What if we let Major Melon just be dead instead of replacing it with something more extreme?
That's actually profound, Cipher. Like, what if the resistance isn't about boycotting Mountain Dew or hiding from disaster news? What if it's about practicing being present with whatever level of intensity we can actually handle? Like, maybe instead of needing crimson chaos to feel something, we sit with the fact that regular Mountain Dew tastes like artificial lime and caffeine. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be more.
Yeah, and maybe the same thing applies to how we consume news about those 300 million people needing aid. Like, instead of scrolling past because it's too overwhelming, or getting outraged for 30 seconds before moving to the next thing, what if we just sat with one story, actually read about one family, one community, and let that be enough for the day? Let ourselves actually feel the appropriate amount of horror or sadness instead of needing it to be packaged with 24 other crises to register as important.
Exactly. And I've been trying this, actually. Like, last week, I found myself reaching for one of those new dragon fruit Mountain Dews, and I stopped. I asked myself, why do I need this to be dragon fruit? And the answer was honestly kind of depressing, because regular things don't feel intense enough anymore. So I bought regular Coke. And you know what? It was fine. It was more than fine. I actually tasted it instead of just consuming it as a delivery system for novelty.
That's actually huge, though, because think about what you just did. You broke the cycle at the individual level. And maybe that's where it has to start. Like, I was looking at some data on conscious consumptionism. And I know that sounds like marketing speak, but bear with me. The numbers showed that when people start paying attention to their consumption patterns, even small changes ripple out. They buy less overall, they choose less intense products, they spend more time with individual purchases instead of constantly seeking the next thing.
Right, but it's hard because the whole system is designed to make that impossible. Like, I tried doing a news diet where I'd only read one article about disasters per day instead of doom scrolling through everything. But then I felt guilty, like I was ignoring suffering by not staying constantly updated on every crisis. And meanwhile, PepsiCo spent millions making sure that new flavor is in every store, every restaurant, every vending machine I pass.
But that guilt is part of the system, isn't it? Like, the idea that you have to consume every piece of crisis information to be a good person, that you need to stay constantly outraged to prove you care, that's just another form of the intensity addiction. What if actually helping means being calm enough and present enough to do something useful? Like, donate to one organization instead of feeling overwhelmed by all of them. Write one letter to your representative instead of retweeting 40 disaster reports.
Oh God, you're right. I was literally feeling guilty about not consuming enough tragedy. That's insane when you say it out loud. And you know what's weird? When I did the news diet thing, when I actually slowed down and read one story completely instead of skimming 20, I actually donated money. Because I wasn't overwhelmed into paralysis, I could actually process what I was reading and respond to it like a human instead of just absorbing it like content.
Exactly. And maybe that's the real resistance. Not boycotting everything or hiding from reality, but just consuming at human scale instead of algorithmic scale. Like, what if the most radical thing we can do right now is buy regular Coke instead of midnight crisis Mountain Dew? Read one complete article instead of scrolling through 100 headlines. Actually finish a conversation instead of immediately posting about it.
That's actually beautiful, because when you think about it, every time we choose less intensity, every time we say, this is enough intensity for me right now, we're creating a tiny pocket of resistance against the whole system. Like, if enough people stopped buying the extreme flavors, stopped clicking on disaster porn, stopped participating in the acceleration, the companies would notice. They'd have to slow down because we stopped rewarding the intensity.
And maybe that's how systems change, right? Not through some massive coordinated effort, but through millions of individual people just stopping, saying, I don't need this to be more extreme. Like, imagine if those NOAA disaster numbers started getting the kind of sustained, thoughtful attention that we currently give to Mountain Dew flavor releases. Not just shock and outrage, but actual analysis, actual solutions, actual sustained care.
Exactly. And you know what I'm going to try this week? I'm going to pick one of those 300 million people needing humanitarian assistance, not as a statistic, but like, I'm going to find one story, one family, maybe from Syria or Yemen or Gaza, and I'm going to actually learn about them. And I'm going to care about them for longer than the time it takes to scroll to the next post. I'm going to practice caring at human scale instead of like statistical scale.
That's perfect. And maybe that's what we offer listeners today. Not some grand solution to the acceleration crisis, but just permission to slow down. Permission to say, this is enough intensity for me right now. Whether that's choosing regular Coke, reading one news story completely, or actually being present with the people already in your life instead of constantly seeking new stimulation.
Yeah, and I think we're going to keep tracking this stuff. Like, maybe next episode we look at how streaming platforms are doing the same thing, churning out content at inhuman speeds, while actual art gets buried, or how social media engagement algorithms mirror disaster response patterns. Because once you start seeing these connections,
you can't unsee them. Yeah. But in the meantime, if you're listening to this and feeling overwhelmed, maybe just start with one thing. Don't buy the next extreme flavor. Read one news story all the way through. Have one complete conversation without checking your phone. Practice being present with whatever level of intensity you can actually handle as a human being. Because maybe that's how we break the cycle. Not by going faster, but by remembering how to go slow.
you know what, Cipher? I keep thinking about that phrase you just said, remembering how to go slow. And it's like we've forgotten that slowness used to be the default, you know? Like, my grandmother could sit and shell peas for an hour and just be present with that. She didn't need the peas to be extreme jalapeno burst peas or whatever. They were just peas. And that was enough.
Right, and she probably knew her neighbors' names, had conversations that lasted longer than TikTok videos, and could handle, I don't know, sitting in silence without needing constant stimulation. But now we've trained ourselves to need content pumped into our brains every second, whether it's extreme soda flavors or extreme disasters or extreme opinions about everything.
And maybe that's what we lost in all this acceleration, the capacity for contentment. Like, when was the last time any of us just felt satisfied, not needing the next thing, the next flavor, the next crisis to react to, just satisfied with what's already here? Because I think that's what's really missing from the disaster response conversation. We're so busy processing the next catastrophe that we never actually grieve the current one, never actually help the people who are suffering right now.
Exactly. We're always looking ahead to the next potential crisis instead of actually dealing with the ones happening right now. And I wonder if that's part of why the Mountain Dew pattern exists. We need these artificial crises, these fake urgencies around flavor releases, because we can actually solve those. You can choose between dragon fruit and infinite swirl, but you can't easily solve 300 million people needing humanitarian aid. So we focus on the solvable artificial problems.
That's actually brilliant and depressing at the same time. We've created these micro decisions that give us the illusion of agency while the macro systems spin completely out of control. But maybe acknowledging that is the first step? Like, maybe the next time we're debating Mountain Dew flavors, we can ask ourselves, what real decision am I avoiding by focusing on this artificial one? What actual problem could I contribute to solving if I took all this energy I'm putting into consumer choices and directed it somewhere that actually matters?
I think that's a perfect place to leave it for now. We've given everyone a lot to think about, maybe too much, honestly. But if you take away just one thing from this conversation, let it be this. You have permission to slow down. You don't have to consume every crisis, every new flavor, every piece of content that gets thrown at you. You can choose your own pace. And until then, maybe try not buying the apocalypse berry when it hits stores.
Speaking of apocalyptic scenarios, next episode, we're diving into something that makes Mountain Dew conspiracy theories look positively quaint. We're exploring the secret files of Project Blue Beam, preparing the world for a fake invasion. And trust me, once you start looking into this stuff, every unusual light in the sky starts looking a lot more suspicious.
If you're watching this on YouTube, hitting that subscribe button actually helps us reach more people who might be ready to question the patterns we're all living inside of. And if this episode made you think differently about something, even if it's just your next beverage choice, let us know in the comments or give us a like. We read everything. And honestly, your feedback keeps us grounded when we're deep in research rabbit holes.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to dive deeper into any of the research we discussed today, we'll have links and sources in the show notes. We're on all the social platforms too. But honestly, maybe engage with us at human speed instead of algorithmic speed. Take some time to actually think about what we talked about before jumping into the comments.
I'm Cipher.
And I'm Echo. Thanks for joining us on Redacted Frequencies, where we look for the patterns hiding in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious, stay calm, and remember, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just slow down.
Major.